Buenos nachos, and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're going to be exploring the world of the OG Xboxes. In today's video, we're going to go over a couple of key items that you should look out for after you've purchased an OG Xbox. As you know, these devices are pretty old nowadays, may have trace rot, leaky capacitors, so on and so forth. So let's open up a console I purchased a little while ago and see which kind of things we need to look out for. So here's our skeleton Xbox, or as I like to call it, the Skeletor Xbox. Nah, don't use that. We need Skeletor to actually pop up and make that noise. Here's our Skeletor Xbox. The question is, do we open it up or do we power it on first? Well, of course we're going to power it on. All right, we have our Xbox all hooked up, so let's go ahead and power it on and see what it's doing. Work first try, bastard. Well, it's saying there's no signal. Let's see, AV. Oh, gotta have power for our device, our AV to HDMI. That looks like our Xbox booted up, and it's of course asking us the date. I am a little surprised this thing is not set to Japanese. Now, the console has booted up, and apparently it seems to be working. But don't let this screen fool you. Once we open up this Xbox, you'll probably find out that it is completely trashed and full of dead cactus rocha. Alright, and at this point we're going to need some tools, that way we can open up this Xbox the proper way. You of course are going to need the T20, and I believe this to be a T10. Yes sir, that's what it says, T10. Get the T20 first. We need one more item before we can begin, and that's going to be our gazpacho. Now that we have our tools, we can go ahead and open up the Xbox. So I have my T20, I have a spatula, we have the executor prying tool. If you don't have a spatula or a prying tool, you can use a flathead screwdriver or something similar. So first thing we'll do is we will pry under here, and we'll just peel this up a tad, and you'll do the same to all four legs. I like to just barely pry them back, that way we can go ahead and retain the sticker. There we go. Now you may ask yourself, well, not all the screws are visible. Yes, that is correct. There's a hidden screw under here. Some people love to retain the stickers, which if you're one of those people, you can do that. I tend to not really care. I would sooner just puncture a hole through the plastic, but it doesn't look as nice. So I can see the reasoning for cutting this like so. And now to remove the screws, so we're going to want to lift this flap up a tad. Now that we've exposed the screw, we can finally unscrew the screw. Same thing for this one. It's always amazing opening up these OG Xbox consoles, especially one that hasn't been touched by anyone else, so you know nothing has been messed with. So I'll tell you, I've received some capacitor jobs that people have sent off to other shops, and those joints are pretty bad. Some of them weren't even really connected. It was just a blob of solder on top of the motherboard on that specific joint, and you could wiggle the capacitor, and of course it just was not attached at all. Some of them actually worked in that condition, but after a couple of minutes, of course, they would throw an error code or the console would just power off on its own. All right, now that we have removed all of the screws, we can begin to open this thing up. So what I like to do is I like to press. Let me go ahead and show you. So I like to press right here. So press in downward motion while pulling this up. And now we just lift straight up, and there is the console. Not much to removing this IDE cable. You're just pushing this way. You will, however, need some pliers to properly remove this cable right here. Nothing to it. And we do have a couple more screws, so now let's go ahead and switch over to our T10. And I could swear these were a T15 that you needed. Unscrew the hard drive caddy first, and there will be two more, one on each side of the disk drive. You'll note that I did not test the disk drive. I just completely forgot. It's not like we can't do that once the console is open, right? All right, and you just stick your fingers right here and pull over here, and this thing comes right up, no problem. And this disk drive will lift up just like this. And you can loosen the disk drive cable by wiggling back and forth. And the IDE cable just pulls straight out. This one will require just a tad bit of wiggling as well. And there you go. Now we can check the motherboard and see if there are any failures we can identify visually. Alright, as you can clearly see, it does indeed look like we have some problems with our clock capacitor And while the corrosion doesn't look like it's made its way to the thermal sensor IC, it's tough to say whether it might have infected it or not. There's definitely going to be some cleaning involved for this. I personally like to clean this off with alcohol first, and then you can use a vinegar solution to help clear it off, and then I would probably recommend another round of alcohol after that. Now, I would recommend that you use the highest potency alcohol you can find. In my case, I use 99.9% isopropyl alcohol. Sometimes you can get 70%, but you will want to make sure that the console has dried completely before you power it on if you're using a low alcohol content alcohol. As you can tell, we have a leaking clock capacitor, and that's going to be the first thing you need to take care of in order to prevent more damage to this console. Best I can tell, this console has no problems with the eject and power buttons, but that could change if we were to allow this to progress. The next thing you want to do is make sure that none of the capacitors are doming. However, the 5 CPU capacitors in this 1.0 revision Xbox do tend to go out, as well as in other revisions of this console. At bare minimum, I do recommend that you replace the 5 capacitors around the CPU, and this will take care of a couple of different issues like random shutting off and picture loss. I'm not spotting any other issues that are capacitor related with this console. However, I do see that there's quite a bit of dust, and I do recommend that you clean it up. Another thing to look out for are the capacitors on the power supply. If these are domed, you'll definitely need to replace them. If you need to know which capacitors to purchase for your power supply, you can take a look right here. Usually the manufacturer's model number is on the side of the power supply. In my case, mine is a DPSN-96AP. The earlier versions of the OG Xbox do have a fan on the GPU. If your fan is inoperable, you can always replace it with a new fan from Noctua using a 3D printed mount. And if you don't want to do that, you can always upgrade the heatsink to one of the larger heatsinks from the later version OG Xboxes. While you're in here, I do recommend that you take a look at the thermal paste. A lot of people recommend that you don't touch the heatsinks if the console is not overheating, and that's actually good advice. I would say only if your console is overheating, or if you're going to do a deep clean on this console, would you want to mess with the heatsinks. Let's hook everything up, make sure the GPU fan is working, and let's see if that disk drive is also functional. I just want to mention that if you do encounter trace rot in your console, I do have some videos on how you can repair that somewhere around here. Let's go ahead and power this thing on and see if the disk drive works. So I don't know if you can see it in there, but the GPU fan is indeed spinning. If it weren't spinning, you could probably try some clock oil on the bearings, and maybe that might get it going again. And now to test out this disk drive. Go ahead and test it out with this game right here. Looks like we have a working disk drive, at least so far. I do have a video on performing maintenance on these disk drives. You can always check it out over here somewhere. There are a couple more things you probably could look out for on the Xbox, such as the power connector where you're plugging in the power cord. If you jiggle that and the console's making sizzling noises, you could always refer to my video somewhere around here on how to repair that. That's a fire hazard, and you definitely don't want to keep your console in that condition. Hopefully the things we went over in this video will help you out, and maybe some of it will point you in the right direction on how to get your Xbox up and running or perform preventative maintenance. That way your console continues to keep running. If you found this video helpful or useful, please remember to leave us a like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Until next time.